Hello everyone and welcome to another Versus Video Deck Tech. I am Brian S. Braun-Duin and I am joined again by...
CBM.
Yep, and we're going to be battling with some more Dragons of Tarkir. Unfortunately, we still do not have the physical cards yet, as the pre-release will be this weekend, but hopefully shortly after this, by that I mean next time we do a video, we'll have real physical cards for the new cards instead of just proxies. But for now, I'm going to be battling with a black-white, I don't know whether to call it a mid-range deck or just a...
It's a BBD deck.
I'm just calling it a black-white deck. I'm not really gonna shackle it with words like mid-range, but it's basically mid-range. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Basically, the core of the deck is Bile-Blight and Brimaz, where you want to curve Bile-Blight into Brimaz.
Usually with the help of Scoured Barons playing its very, very best Orzhov Guildgate impersonation.
Yeah, Scoured Barons, forget the trigger, untap, Swamp Bile-Blight, untap, Plains Brimaz is really just the core of this deck. But yeah, basically this is a deck similar to something that Brad Nelson actually played like 5 months ago probably, where you have these cheap creatures that generate value when you play a spell, and then you just have a bunch of spells to get value out of them, and then we're culminating it at the top with like Wingmate Rock to kind of just go over the top. So I think that this deck actually stands to gain a lot from the new set, and I want to talk about like why that is. And I think one of the big things is Myth Realized, which is really just a kind of innocuous card, but I think it's actually a really powerful card. For one, it's a very cheap way to trigger prowess, which I think is important. With a card like Monastery Mentor, you want as many cheap spells as you can basically have to be able to generate prowess tokens like as early as possible. So something even like on 4 mana, being able to go Monastery Mentor followed by Thoughtseize, or Monastery Mentor followed by a Myth Realized, and get a token out of the mix even if they kill your mentor is actually like pretty key. Like that token could end up being like the thing that gives you a Wingmate Rock, or even with just more spells it can just trade up or something. So being able to like get value out of those cards is sweet. But even beyond that, just being able to play this on turn 1 and then play a normal game of Magic, and eventually it's just like a 5/5 or 6/6 or...
Yeah, it just has like super prowess, right? Like it gets +1/+1 that just stays for the rest of the game.
Yep. So I think that this card's actually pretty sweet, and it actually plays kind of well in multiples with each other too, because additional copies like trigger the earlier copies. So even if you draw a bunch of them, like arguably they're even better than just drawing one. So I think that card's pretty sweet. Another awesome card too is Ultimate Price, which I think is going to be one of the better cards in the set. Even though there are a lot of multicolored creatures like Siege Rhino, people are still playing like these creatures, which are all single colored, and stuff like Rabblemaster and Stormbreath Dragon and Pelucranos and Whisperwood, and like there's a lot of powerful monocolored creatures that are being played right now. So I think Ultimate Price is going to be pretty good.
And it's not so much that Ultimate Price, the restriction on it killing a monocolored creature doesn't matter very much, because it's just a 2-mana interactive spell. Like we've been playing the last 6 months or so without any very good 2-mana interactive spells, and this set is full of them. So Standard, as we know it, is going to change, and it's going to be on the back of the Ultimate Price, the Roast, the Silk Wrap, or whatever the white one is. Like there are a lot of 2-mana interactive spells that we just haven't had the luxury of having. So we're used to playing these games where our threats are trading with like 3-mana Heroes Downfalls, and we're staying on parity. But Ultimate Price and Roast and the like are going to change the game quite a bit.
Yeah, no longer do you have to like play a tap land on turn 2, take a hit from a Rabblemaster, then kill it on your turn. You now just like sit there with 2 mana open. Like they can't even necessarily always cast the card into it. Yeah, it's really going to change the dynamic a lot. Another thing I like about this deck too is actually like the ability for some of the spells to be creatures too. So even though we have like a very low number of actual creatures because we want to keep the spell count high for Monastery Mentor and Seeker, between Sorin and Myth Realized, we actually still have a lot of spells that still make creatures. So we're not like we're still pretty threat dense despite having a lot of spells, and there's even like other cards that I'm not playing that you could play, like Secure the Wastes or Raise the Alarm or things like that that also do that same thing. other than that, it's just a pretty straightforward deck. I'm playing Read the Bones to try to provide like some amount of card advantage. I think when you're playing a card like Monastery Mentor, you need to have like some way to keep spells rolling. So I want a couple of Read the Bones for that reason, but I don't want to like flood on the effects. You know, we do have a lot of ways to gain life between Seeker, Sorin, and Wingmate Rock, but still like, oh, and also Scoured Barrens, can't forget that. Gain that
Trigger.
one. But I don't want to like flood on too many like slow and reactive cards like this.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, that is the main deck for white-black cards I own. Let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard. All right, so here we have the sideboard, and the first sideboard card is Duress, which is actually, along with Ultimate Price, the other like powerful black card from Dragons of Tarkir that I think are going to push a lot of decks like this one, or various Abzan decks over the top, because now you have a way to actually fight control decks that you didn't have before. Previously, like you just had to rely just on Thoughtseize, and now that we have Duress, we can like do what we did last standard season and Duress and Thoughtseize them, and they can't top deck Sphinx's Revelation anymore. So
yeah, it's Sphinx's like the primary card advantage spell being Dig Through Time in standard is much less effective against a bevy of pinpoint hand disruption, whereas Sphinx's Revelation just didn't matter because they would get to draw 12 cards.
Yeah, it just wasn't always like when you're playing Duress and Thoughtseize against the Sphinx's Revelation deck, you had to actually like kill them. Yeah, because eventually they draw a Revelation on 8 lands and draw 5 cards, and suddenly like you can Thoughtseize them after that, but they still are gonna have 3 spells left afterwards. But now that they're relying on like Dig and cards that aren't nearly as good, you can probably just play it in actual grind them out kind of strategy.
It also is important that Revelation was great. Like both cards were good against each other. Like Thoughtseize and Duress were good against the Revelation cards, but Rev was also very good against those cards because in the late game, they would Thoughtseize you. You could Rev in response and still get to keep 1 or 2 good cards. But now if you Thoughtseize somebody and they're sitting on a Dig, like what are they just gonna, I guess they just have to Dig and they need to take the best of the 2 cards they take. So it's the format's a little bit different. There's not as good of a card as Sphinx's Revelation, and Thoughtseize and Duress are going to be able to shine because of it.
Yeah. We also have a couple Wingmate Rocks on the board to come in against like various green decks, generally speaking, or like Jeskai or things with like Mantis Rider and things like that. Yeah. We're going to want more Wingmate Rocks. A couple of Elspeths as well. They're going to come in probably some of the more mid-rangey matchups. I don't think you actually... You probably side them in against control decks, but I don't think they're actually like a game-winning threat in those matchups. They're more for like, the Siege Rhino kind of decks where play this grindy game for a while and then Elspeth just kind of goes over the top.
Yep.
Another Ultimate Price, just another removal spell, a couple of erase for various enchantments that are pretty prolific in standard right now, and then some Reads and Drowns as well for respective matchups like Red-White for Drowned or other control decks for Read. Even Abzan control, I would want more Read the Bones just as another way to pull ahead on cards. So
I think any matchup really that you're going to bring in the Duress outside of Burn, you would want the Read the Bones to go along with them.
Yeah, pretty much. They kind of go hand in hand. In fact, I'm just going to move them closer together just for value. But anyway, that is the white-black deck. Chris is not doing a deck tech today as he is just playing a green-red deck that we've seen before with a couple of new additions that definitely boost its power level, but it's nothing too off the wall. His myths have yet to be realized.
Yeah, it's just an update to the red-green aggro deck that started to get popular towards the end of, I guess, technically the current standard season. But it's, we're just the old Elvish Mystic into Flame Wake Phoenix. We're going to run it back.
All right, we'll see if that actually does sound like a myth that might become realized. So we'll see if he can pull that off.